House will please come to order. Those not having privileges of the floor will please vacate the chamber at this time. All members and guests in the galleries will please rise as we are led in prayer today by the gentleman from the 5th, Doggett Pethel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Let us pray. Our gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for giving us this opportunity to be here and assemble today. We would ask that you would be all the members, all the words that are spoken and said here, that they would be for the upbuilding of your kingdom, and they would be words that you would want us to speak. We ask you would be with our guests that are here today, give them safe travel to and from their destination. Let us turn to you in a divided country, in a divided world, that we would turn to you when the decisions we make are decisions that you would want us to make. Now watch over us and guide us, and in death save us. Amen.
Amen. Members and guests in the galleries will please remain standing as we are led in the Pledge of Allegiance today by the gentleman from the 22nd, Doggett Maynard.
Thank you. Would everybody please stand as we honor our great flag? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Members and guests may be seated. Reading of the Journal.
Journal of the House of Delegates, Charleston, Monday, February 11th, 2019.
Gentleman of the 7th, Doggett Harshbarger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that the further reading of the journal be dispensed with and that it be approved as having been read.
Gentleman of the 7th act unanimous consent that further reading of the journal be dispensed with and it be approved as having been read. Are there objections? Chair hears no objections. Introduction to guests. Gentleman of the 27th, Doggett Ellington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today is Hospital Day at the Legislature. We have visiting with us a number of hospital representatives and healthcare professionals from across the state. If you have any of your hospital representatives visiting from your local community, please take a moment to thank them for all the care they provide over the course of the year. Hospitals play a very critical role in improving the health of our citizens. Annually, West Virginia hospitals treat over 7 million people in their outpatient departments, provide emergency care to over 1.2 million patients, deliver over 19,000 new West Virginians, and also care for over 227,000 people as inpatients. They also play a very important role in our economy. They employ more than 46,000 members or people in our community, and also contribute about $10.5 billion annually to the state's economy. They're also very important in our educational system. They give instructional programs that provide for a wide range of services and technical and professional positions. Please join me and give a warm hand welcoming each of those professionals here. And Mr. Speaker, on behalf of all the delegates from Mercer County, we have several people here from Mercer County. In the North Gallery, I believe Mr. Jeff Lilly, who is the CEO of Princeton Community Hospital, Mr. Tim Best, CEO of Bluefield Regional Medical Center, Rebecca Ritter, who is Director of Marketing and Public Relations for Bluefield Regional Medical Center, if they would stand and be recognized. And then we also have some of our Princeton EMS people, Loretta Justice, Helen Phillips, Jessica Sizemore, James Hill, and Katie Johnson. If the House would make them all feel welcome.
Gentleman from the 54th, Doggett Hott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of Delegate Sponogle and myself, we have 3 guests in the South Gallery, and I'd like for them to stand to be recognized. From our regional health care facility of Grant Memorial Hospital, we have Chief Executive Officer Bob Milvitt, we have the Chief Nursing Officer Kim Linville, and we have Tasha Thompson. Would the House make them feel welcome?
The gentleman from the 29th, Doggett Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the delegates from the 27th through the 32nd districts representing Raleigh County, I'm pleased to introduce today several students from the University of Charleston in Beckley here with the Occupational Therapist Assistance Program. They're seated in the West Gallery. Lydia Honecker of Beckley, Kelly Price of Beckley, Danielle Ormandy, Alexandra Fagali, Andrea Schoonover, Joshua Hensley, and Miranda Vanderhans. if the House would give them a welcome. Thank you.
The gentleman from the 45th, Doggett Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today we have some guests from St. Joseph's Hospital in Buchanan. If they would please stand and the House make them feel welcome.
Gentleman from the 28th, Doggett Pack.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the gentleman from 28, Delegate Cooper, and myself, we have a very special page with us today. She's a fourth grader from Victory Baptist Academy, Miss Madison Pack. If she would stand and the House make her welcome.
The gentleman from the 18th, Delegate Worrell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I have the honor to introduce a guest, my former predecessor, 16-year member of this body, current Cabell County Commissioner. She goes by the Commish, Kelly Sabonia. Please make her welcome.
Lady from the 32nd, Delegate Kessinger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the delegates from the 32nd District, I'd like to welcome the state's greatest sheriff. Mike Fridley has joined us today, so if he would stand and the House would make him welcome.
The gentleman from the 62nd, Doggett Bibby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the delegates from the Eastern Panhandle, I'd like to put out a warm welcome to Mr. Mike Hassing. He's the Chief Executive Officer for Shenandoah Community Health Center. If he's here, please stand and let's give him a good round of applause.
The gentleman from the 25th, Doggett Painter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With the page program today, from, as always, the prettiest place in the world, I'd like to introduce some of the finest folks in the world. From Herndon Consolidated, Mr. Zach McCormick, Madison Carr, Cody Witten. They're accompanied by Wanda Witt, Kenneth Witt, Carissa McCormick, William Davis, and Alma Watson. Let's give them all a big house welcome.
The gentleman from the 10th, Doggett Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the delegates from Wood County, and we have members of the Mid-Ohio Valley Chamber of Commerce in the Capitol today. If any of them are in the chamber, would they please stand and the House make them feel welcome?
Gentleman from the 23rd, Doggett Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With us in the South Gallery, I'd like to introduce to you here for Hospital Day, members from Boone Memorial Hospital. We have our Chief Operating Officer, Mr. Mark Linville, and our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Chad Hovis. If the House would please make them feel welcome.
The gentleman from the 35th, Douglas Scaff.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm delighted to have a page with us today. On behalf of my colleague, Delegate Lovejoy, and I, we'd like to welcome from Hurricane Middle School, Curry Taylor, if he would stand and be recognized, and also his father in the West Gallery, old college friend of mine, Justin Taylor. Thank you for being here. Please make him feel welcome.
The gentleman from the 5th, Douglas Pethel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the delegation from the 51st and myself, we have students here today for Occupational Therapy Day from West Virginia University. I would ask as I call their name, they're in the North Gallery behind me, that they would please stand. Kendall Burge, Lauren Campbell, Jenna Vernon, Zoe Rupert, and their professor, Diana Davis. And a special welcome to Evelyn Estep from New Martinsville, who's a student in the occupational therapy program at WVU. And I also want to say about Evelyn that her great-grandparents, Herb Shoeball and Evelyn Shoeball, were both members of the House of Delegates. Let's give them all a big hand. Thank you.
The lady from the 49th.
Thank
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the North Gallery today with us is former Secretary of the DHHR, Karen Bowling. If she would stand up, and the House make her welcome.
The gentleman of 34th, Douglas Boggs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And my microphone is working today. Listen, I know the Majority Leader just introduced Karen Bowling, but with the lady's permission, I want to also again introduce Karen, because many of you, this being Hospital Day, I've been on the Board of Directors at Braxton County Memorial Hospital for many years. And our previous administrator, and I know a lot of the Hospital Association people in the gallery were very fond of our late administrator, Ben Vincent. Ben tragically passed away a few months ago, but he had initiated the Braxton County Memorial Hospital, working with WVU Health System for Braxton Memorial to become part of WVU Health Systems. And I'm pleased that that took place even after Ben's passing on January 1st of this year. But so, therefore, I am very pleased to introduce the former Cabinet Secretary of DHHR and now our CEO at Braxton Memorial, Karen Bowling. Karen, if you would stand, and the members would again make you welcome.
The gentleman of 43rd, Douglas Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today with us, we are blessed to have some pages coming to us from Randolph County. With us today, we have Preston Nixon, Logan Nixon, Thomas Nixon. They are students at Jennings Randolph and Elkins Middle School, and they are escorted today by their mother, Christine Nixon, if you would stand. Also today with us, we have Madeline Lambert, a student at Elkins Midland Elementary School, escorted by her parents, Brian and Carla Lambert. If you guys would please stand. Also, we have Delia White, a student at Midland, and her parent, Amy White. Also, we have Rachel Himes, who is escorted today by Melody and Kenny Himes, and she is a student at North School. If you guys would also please stand, and House make them feel welcome.
The gentleman of 43rd, Douglas Hartman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have, on behalf of Delegate Thompson and me from Randolph County 4-H, we have Hayden Sims, Aiden Lowther, Sophia Boyles, and Cameron Warner. And in the West Gallery, we have a whole group of parents. If they would all stand, and the House make them welcome.
Gentleman of 16th, Douglas Mant.
Good morning. In the North Gallery, we have some friends from St. Mary's Medical Center from Huntington, West Virginia. If they would please stand. We have David Shields, Doug Kristangi, Regina Campbell, and Lisa Breeden. Welcome.
The gentleman of the 14th, Douglas Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Joining us from Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and Grace Baptist Church, he's a pastor there. If he would stand, we have John Pinson. If the House would please welcome him, please.
The gentleman of the 42nd, Douglas Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have two sets of introductions here this morning. First, we have a page with us today. If he'll stand, from Eastern Greenbrier Middle School, Jason Ream. He is escorted by his mother, sitting in the West Gallery. If she would stand, Renee Ream. And in our South Gallery, we have some Greenbrier County Schools employees down visiting today. If they would stand when I call their name: Jim Alder, Nancy Sark, April Vincent, Bob Browning, who's here celebrating his birthday today, and probably the closest thing that I've ever had to a big sister, Sandy Beal. If she would stand, will the House please make them welcome?
The lady of the 42nd, Douglas Lavender Bow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have one more visitor from the 42nd District, and on behalf of myself and Delegate Campbell, please welcome Barbara Sanders from the West Virginia School of Osteopathic Medicine. Thank you.
The gentleman of 28th, Douglas Pack.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the North Gallery, escorting my page today, Miss Madison Pack is her mother, Miss Shanna Pack, if she would stand. Additionally, there's a young man from Victory Baptist Academy that's come down to spend the day with me. His name is Andy Williams. He's here with his mom, Tina. If they would stand, and the House please make them welcome.
Yeah, that'd be fine. Are there further introductions? If not, report to standing committees.
Committee on Government Organization has had under consideration House Bill 2716 relating to motorboat lighting and equipment requirements. Reports the same back with recommendation that it do pass.
Report to be received.
Committee on Government Organization has had under consideration House Bill 2881 altering the color scheme for county vehicle registration plates. Reports the same back with recommendation that it do pass, that it be referred to Committee on Finance.
Report to be received. Bill be referred to Committee on Finance.
Committee on Fire Departments and Emergency Medical Services has had under consideration House Bill 2586, providing programs to train firefighters and emergency medical technicians. Reports the same back with recommendation that it do pass, that it be referred to Committee on Education.
Report to be received. Bill be referred to Committee on Education.
Committee on Fire Departments and Emergency Medical Services has had under consideration House Bill 2501, authorizing municipal fire departments specialized license plates. Reports the same back with recommendation that it do pass, that it be referred to Committee on Government Organization.
Report to be received. Bill be referred to Committee on Government Organization.
Committee on Fire Departments and Emergency Medical Services has had under consideration House Bill 2872, authorizing law enforcement officers to assist the state fire marshal. Reports the same back with recommendation that it do pass, that it be referred to Committee on Judiciary.
Report to be received. Bill be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
Committee on Technology and Infrastructure has had under consideration House Bill 2846, designating a Back the Blue plate in support of law enforcement personnel. Reports the same back with recommendation that it do pass, that it be referred to Committee on Finance.
Report to be received. Lady from the 49th.
Mr. Speaker, the two chairs conferred on this matter, and I now ask unanimous consent that second reference of the bill to the Committee on Finance be dispensed with.
Lady in the 49th asks unanimous consent that the second reference of House Bill 2846 to the Committee on Finance be dispensed with. Are there objections? Chair hears no objections.
Committee on Technology and Infrastructure has had under consideration House Bill 2011 Road Maintenance Program. Reports the same back with amendment with recommendation that it do pass as amended, that it be referred to Committee on Government Organization.
Report to be received. Bill be referred to Committee on Government Organization.
Committee on Technology and Infrastructure has had under consideration House Bill 2472, providing a special license plate for pollinators. Reports the same back with amendment with recommendation that it do pass as amended, that it be referred to Committee on Finance.
Report to be received. Lady from the 49th.
Mr. Speaker, the two chairs and the pollinator in the group have agreed on this matter, and I now ask unanimous consent that second reference of the bill on the Committee with Finance be dispensed with.
Lady from the 49th asks unanimous consent that the second reference of House Bill 2472 to the Committee on Finance be dispensed with. Are there objections? Chair hears no objections.
Committee on Technology and Infrastructure has had under consideration House Concurrent Resolution 7, Kidd Brothers Bridge, House Concurrent Resolution 11, United States Army Command Sergeant Major Timothy Allen Boyard Memorial Bridge, House Concurrent Resolution 26, George Roush Memorial Bridge, House Concurrent Resolution 32, requesting the Secretary of the Department of Transportation to authorize raising highway speed limits where appropriate to 75 miles per hour on interstate highways in West Virginia and to 70 miles per hour on West Virginia's Appalachian Corridor highways. Reports back committee substitutes, therefore, with recommendation that the committee substitutes each be adopted, that to be referred to Committee on Rules.
Report to be received. Each resolution be referred to Committee on Rules.
Committee on Technology and Infrastructure has had under consideration House Concurrent Resolution 4, Gold Star Families Highway, House Concurrent Resolution 13, Chief Robert Edward Dorsey Memorial Highway, House Concurrent Resolution 19, United States Marine Sergeant Stephen E. Drummond Memorial Bridge, House Concurrent Resolution 23, United States Army Sergeant Rodney David King and United States Army Sergeant James Harris King Memorial Bridge, House Concurrent Resolution 43, United States Army Air Corps Tech Sergeant Ralph H. Ray Bridge, and House Concurrent Resolution 44, United States Marine Corps Private First Class Randall Carl Phelps Memorial Bridge. Reports the same back with recommendation that they be adopted, that they be referred to Committee on Rules.
Report to be received. All resolutions be referred to the Committee on Rules.
Committee on Judiciary has had under consideration House Bill 2538, providing banking services for medical cannabis. Reports back committee substitute, therefore, with recommendation that the committee substitute do pass.
Report to be received.
Committee on Judiciary has had under consideration House Bill 2579, relating to the collection of tax and the priority of distribution of an estate or property in receivership. House Bill 2618, including undue influence as a factor in the definition of financial exploitation of an elderly person or protected person. Reports back committee substitutes, therefore, with recommendation that the committee substitutes each do pass.
Report to be received.
Committee on Judiciary has had under consideration Senate Bill 377, relating to minimum wage and maximum hour standards. Reports the same back with amendment, with recommendation that it do pass as amended.
Report to be received.
Committee on Judiciary has had under consideration Committee substitute for Senate Bill 398, relating to compensation for senior judges. Reports the same back with amendment, with recommendation that it do pass as amended, that it be referred to Committee on Finance.
Report to be received. Bill be referred to Committee on Finance.
Committee on Finance has had under consideration Committee substitute for Senate Bill 451, comprehensive education reform. Reports the same back with amendment, with recommendation that it do pass as amended.
Report to be received. Lady from the 49th.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the bill be taken up for immediate consideration and read a first time.
Lady from the 49th asks unanimous consent that committee substitute for Senate Bill 451 be taken up for immediate consideration and read a first time. Are there objections? Chair hears no objections. Clerk will read the bill a first time.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 451, comprehensive education reform.
Bill will be advanced. Are there further committee reports? If not, reports to select committees. Messages from the executive.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Henshaw presents a communication from His Excellency the Governor advising that on February 11th, 2019, he approved committee substitute for Senate Bill 17.
Message to be received. Further messages from the executive. Messages from the Senate.
The Clerk of the Senate announced that the Senate has passed without amendment committee substitute for House Bill 2307, relating to creating a provisional license for practicing barbering and cosmetology.
Message to be received.
The Senate has passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 14, creating West Virginia Farm to School Grant Program.
Message will be received. Bill be referred to Committee on Agriculture and Natural Resources, then the Committee on Finance.
The Senate has passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 19, relating to Senior Farmers Market Nutrition Program.
Message will be received. Bill be referred to Committee on Agriculture and Natural Resources, then the Committee on Finance.
The Senate has concurred in the House amendments to and passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 240, repealing certain legislative rules no longer authorized or are obsolete.
Message will be received.
The Senate has passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 317, authorizing 3 or more adjacent counties form multi-county trail network authority.
Message will be received. Bill be referred to Committee on Agriculture and Natural Resources, then the Committee on Judiciary.
The Senate has passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 352, relating to Division of Corrections and Rehabilitation, acquiring and disposing of services, goods, and commodities.
Message will be received. Bill be referred to Committee on Government Organization, then the Committee on Finance.
The Senate has passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 408, determining indigency for public defender services.
Message will be received. Bill be referred to Committee on Judiciary.
The Senate has passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 496, transferring authority to regulate milk from DHHR to Department of Agriculture.
Message will be received. Bill be referred to Committee on Government Organization.
The Senate has passed Senate Bill 499, amending West Virginia tax laws to conform to changes in partnerships for federal income tax purposes.
Message will be received. Bill be referred to Committee on Finance.
The Senate has passed Senate Bill 542, relating to registration fees for military-related special registration plates.
Message will be received. Bill be referred to Committee on Technology and Infrastructure, then the Committee on Finance.
The Senate has passed committee substitute for Senate Joint Resolution 5, classification of the judiciary's role in impeachment proceedings amendment.
Message will be received. Resolution will be referred to Committee on Finance, then the Committee on Judiciary. Further messages from the Senate. Resolutions.
House Resolution 14, requesting the United States Congress to provide funding for the purchase of residential areas of Minden, Fayette County, West Virginia.
Lady from the 49th.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the further reading of resolutions introduced be dispensed with and they be considered as formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committees as indicated on the chamber automation system.
The lady from the 49th asked unanimous consent that further reading of resolutions introduced be dispensed with, that each resolution be considered as having been formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on the chamber automation system. Are there objections? Are there objections? Chair hears no objections. Petitions, Motions?
Delegate C. Thompson moves to remove from the table the motion by Delegate Fluharty of February 7th, 2019, that pursuant to House Rule 82, that House Bill 2733 be discharged from the Committee on Industry and Labor.
The question before the House is a motion by the gentleman from the 43rd that the motion be taken from the table. Roll call has been demanded. The question before the House is not a debatable question. For what purpose does the gentleman from the 66 seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the desire of the body to leave that motion on the table, we would vote red on this motion.
The gentleman is correct.
Thank you.
The gentleman from the 50th, Delegate Caputo.
Seems like the whip and I go back and forth on this every day. So if we want to proceed with that bill, we must vote green, must vote yes on the gentleman's motion, correct?
Gentleman is correct.
Thank you.
The question before the House is the motion that House Bill 2733 be taken from the table. Those in favor, roll call has been demanded. Is the demand sustained? Demand is sustained. The question before the House is the gentleman's motion. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on this question. 41 ayes, 58 nays, 1 member absent, not voting, less than a majority in favor. The chair declares the motion rejected. Are there further motions? Bills introduced.
House Bill 2014, West Virginia Intellectual Property and Trade Secrets Act.
Lady from the 49th.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the further reading of bills introduced be dispensed with and they be considered as formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committees as indicated on the chamber automation system.
Lady from the 49th asks unanimous consent that further reading of bills introduced be dispensed with, that each bill be considered as having been formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on the chamber automation system. Are there objections? Chair hears no objections. So ordered. Chair would also ask unanimous consent that bills introduced pursuant to House Rule 92, introduced after the deadline of yesterday, 12 noon, be dispensed with. Those are there objections? Chair hears no objections. Bills shall be introduced. Unfinished business. Bills on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2330, allowing honorably discharged veterans who possess certain military ratings to qualify to take an examination for licensing as a plumber, electrician, and sprinkler fitter.
Gentleman from the 56, Douglas Howell, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The committee substitute allows any person who has served honorably in the reserves or active duty of any armed forces of the United States who has successfully completed the course instruction required to qualify as either a plumber, electrician, electrician's mate, fire protection officer, or other equivalent rating in his or her particular branch of the armed services, and submits an application, documentation, and the prescribed license fee to the appropriate agency to be eligible to take the requisite examination. The plumber exam is administered through the Division of Labor. The electrician and fire protection exams are administered through the state's fire marshal office. Mr. Speaker, what the bill does is recognize the training and experience of our returning servicemen and women, allowing them to find good-paying jobs. I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, the question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, 99 ayes, 0 nays, 1 member absent, not voting. A majority of those present having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. Clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2330.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action to the House, to the Senate, and request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2405, imposing a health care-related provider tax on certain health care organizations.
The gentleman from the 27th, Douglas Ellington, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill creates what is essentially a provider tax on managed care organizations. We actually passed a similar bill last year from the House, didn't make it through the Senate because it was late in the session period. The tax is required by federal law to be broad-based, meaning that it is applicable to both public and private markets. Those rates may be set at different amounts, but both have to be taxed. Nothing in the bill becomes active until the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services approves it. CMS approval usually takes around 6 to 8 months. The earliest this could become active is the fiscal year 2021. The tax shall end on June 30th, 2022, if it is approved by CMS. It can be extended later if we approve that. Nothing can guarantee that CMS will approve it. However, DHHR believes that this particular legislation will assist in obtaining approval from CMS. Currently, Ohio has had the same type of thing done. They've also received approval and is currently doing that. The bill itself will raise approximately $50 to $55 million from the provider tax that can be matched with the feds for another $200 to $220 million estimated based on current rolls. Mr. Speaker, I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, the question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, 89 ayes, 10 nays, 1 member absent not voting. Majority of those present having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2405.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action to the House, to the Senate, request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2468, Department of Agriculture Capital Improvements Fund.
Laid in the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to postpone action one day.
Lady from the 49th asked unanimous consent that action on committee substitute for House Bill 2468 be postponed one day. Are there objections? Chair hears no objections. Action is postponed one day. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2674, creating a student loan repayment program for a mental health provider.
The gentleman of the 27th, Doug Ellington, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The bill requires that the HEPC creates a student loan repayment program for a mental health provider who lives and works in an underserved area for 5 years starting on January 1st, 2020. All the specifics of the program will be determined by the HEPC in legislative rules. That also includes who qualifies as a mental health provider. Examples of professionals who may qualify include a psychologist, clinical social worker, licensed professional counselor, or a licensed marriage and family therapist. This topic was studied during the 2018 interims by the Joint Committee on Health. The bill is prospective and there are no fiscal ramifications for the next 5 years. Mr. Speaker, I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? The gentleman from the 11th, Doug Atkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this bill. In meeting with recent graduates working in West Virginia, psychology graduates and others, their biggest concern was paying their school loan, their college loan back. Some stating they may have to leave West Virginia in order to do this. This bill gives graduates an opportunity to work, live, and raise a family in West Virginia, knowing after 5 years their loan may be forgiven. This bill addresses much needed support for our education system, providing help for our classroom teachers, our students who are crying out for help with mental and behavioral health issues. This bill may help alleviate shortages as identified in our interim health committee study and a report stating we are 1,507 support personnel short in our school system. This bill helps with prevention in children and their early development, prevention versus rehabilitation, support for our teachers and students, helping to achieve a drug-free, educated workforce in West Virginia. Thank you.
The gentleman from the 62nd, Doug Bibby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman yield for a question?
Gentleman does yield for a question.
Yes, sir.
When I looked through the bill, I didn't see the termination point there. Is it correct that it's 5 years?
It would start in 5 years. I mean, January 1st, 2020 is when it initiates. And then if they're in for 5 years, at the 5-year mark is when they could receive the repayments.
So, but I guess my question was, after 5 years, is the individual able to leave the state of West Virginia and take employment elsewhere? And is the loan forgiven?
That would be correct, yes.
Was there any discussion on why 5 and not maybe 10 years, or was there?
Part of that was that over that 5-year period, they felt that that person would be established in their community and most likely would stay rather than leaving. That was the purpose of that.
I'm familiar with laws in a similar program in North Carolina. It's 10 years. My daughter's in one where she would be forgiven after 10 years. But in light of the the period, I didn't think there was any period, but in light of the 5 years, I'd support this bill, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the response.
Are there other members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? Does the gentleman wish to close debate? If not, the question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, 95 ayes, 4 nays, 1 member absent, not voting. The majority of those present having voted in the affirmative, chair declares the bill passed. Clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2674.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2734 relating to reduced rates for low-income residential customers of privately owned sewer and combined water and sewer utilities.
The lady from the 32nd, Douglas Kessinger, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill would expand the utilities that currently can apply to the Public Service Commission for special reduced rates and charges for service for low-income residential utility customers to include privately owned sewer utilities and combined water and sewer utilities. Current law authorizes only privately owned water utilities to apply for such reduced rates. The special rates would be available for customers that are receiving Social Security supplemental security income, temporary assistance for needy families, temporary assistance for needy families unemployed parent program, or assistance from the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, if the customer is 60 years of age or older. The rate that may be approved by the PSC are to be a reduction by a percentage and may not exceed a 20% reduction. Likewise, the bill expands the utilities that are eligible to receive a tax credit against the state business and occupation tax in the amount of costs of providing utility service at the reduced rate to include sewer utilities. Any amount of credit unused may be taken as a credit against corporate net income taxes due for a taxable year, and any amount still unused may be carried forward to the subsequent year for use against business and occupation tax liability, but must be applied before other credits. I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, the question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, 97 ayes, 2 nays, 1 member absent, not voting. Majority of those present having voted in the affirmative, chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2734.
Are there members of the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2813 relating generally to collection of use tax.
Gentleman from the 10th, Douglas Chris, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning. This bill will provide definitions for the administration and the collection of West Virginia's use tax from out-of-state retailers that do not have a physical presence in this state and who have not voluntarily agreed to collect West Virginia's use tax, but have an economic nexus within this state, as defined in this bill, on sales to consumers in this state. This bill will also require certain out-of-state retailers known as market facilitators to collect West Virginia use tax. The marketplace facilitator, in essence, contracts with third-party sellers to promote their sale of physical property, digital goods, and services through the marketplace. Mr. Speaker, I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are the members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, 89 ayes, 10 nays, 1 member absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present having voted in the affirmative, chair declares the bill passed. Clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2813.
Are there members of the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Request concurrence therein. Are there further bills on third reading? If not, bills on second reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 18 relating to crimes committed on state capitol complex.
Are there amendments? Bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 61 adding certain crimes for which prosecutor may apply for wiretap.
Are there amendments?
Committee on Judiciary moves to amend the bill.
Does the gentleman from the 27th wish to explain the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Because this is a Senate bill, the amendment of the Committee on the Judiciary is a strike and insert amendment. When the bill came to us from the Senate, it deals with crimes for which a wiretap warrant can be issued. It contained a number of crimes, but some of those were duplicative of crimes already covered in the statute. We've removed those in the strike and insert. Therefore, I would urge the adoption of the strike and insert amendment.
Are there amendments to the amendment?
Delegates Storch and Steele move to amend the amendment. This is HFA Storch and Steele 2-12, number 1.
Question before the House is the secondary amendment by Delegates Storch and Steele, the gentleman from the 29th and the lady from the 3rd. Does the gentleman from the 29th wish to explain the secondary amendment?
Yes, I do, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Gentleman may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment that's offered by myself and Delegate Storch would go into the admissibility of this evidence, and there are two small, I believe there's three small changes. In 62(1)(d)(6), it would provide that this evidence would be admissible in any other court of competent jurisdiction. It would also provide that any person testifying as to the evidence that would be admissible from these wiretaps could testify in federal court, and by testifying in federal court, they would not be going awry of any law of the state of West Virginia. It would give them permission to, if other parts of the state code would prohibit them otherwise from testifying about it, if they were to testify in federal court, this would allow them to testify about this evidence that we would be collecting. And similarly, law enforcement officers would be able to testify about derivative evidence in this state, as well as those courts of the United States. And the purpose of the amendment, this is already in code that this evidence is allowed to be testified about, but this would be adding the federal courts so that law enforcement officers and other witnesses could testify about this information in federal court without any type of state prohibitions. We would urge its passage.
The question before the House is the adoption of the secondary amendment as just explained by the gentleman from the 29th. Are there members who wish to speak to the adoption of the secondary amendment? The gentleman from the 27th, Delegate Schott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment effectively combines into Senate Bill 61, which is before you, House Bill 2173, which is on first reading. It was also passed out of the Judiciary Committee. So basically what we're doing is combining two bills into one. It's more efficient that way, and the contents of the amendment are certainly acceptable. Therefore, I urge its adoption.
Are there other members who wish to speak to the adoption of the secondary amendment? If not, the question before the House is the adoption of the secondary amendment. Those in favor of the secondary amendment, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed to the secondary amendment, please say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The secondary amendment is adopted. The question before the House now is the adoption of the primary amendment as amended by the House. Are there members who wish to speak to the adoption of the primary amendment as amended by the House? If not, the question before the House is the adoption of the primary amendment as amended. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it, and the primary amendment is adopted. Are there further amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 323, establishing revenue fund and source to support Department of Agriculture's improvement of facilities.
Are there amendments? The bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2109, extending the maximum period of confinement a judge may impose for certain first-time probationary violations.
Are there amendments? The bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2609, relating to presumptions of abandonment and indication of ownership and property.
Are there amendments? The bill will be advanced.
House Bill 2647, Self-Storage Limited License Act.
Are there amendments? The bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2720, authorizing certain investigators and first responders to carry firearms.
Are there amendments? The bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2761, modernizing the self-service storage lien law.
Lady in the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to postpone action one day.
Lady in the 49th, I ask unanimous consent that further action on committee substitute for House Bill 2761 be postponed one day. Are there objections? Chair hears no objections. Further action postponed one day. Next bill on second reading.
House Bill 2878, relating to updating the controlled substances listed on Schedule 1.
Are there amendments?
Delegates Pushton and Fluharty move to amend the bill. This is HFA Pushkin Fluharty, number 1.
Does the gentleman from the 37th, Delegate Pushton, wish to explain the amendment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment simply strikes cannabis from Schedule 1 and reschedules as Schedule 4 non-narcotic to get it more in line with the Medical Cannabis Act that we overwhelmingly passed a couple years ago. Thank you.
The question,
and I'd ask for the yeas and nays.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. Are there members who wish to speak to the adoption of the amendment? The gentleman from the 27th, Delegate Ellington.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I would urge rejection of the gentleman's amendment for the following reasons. First, the bill is related to updating Schedule 1 medications to keep us in sync with the feds, and marijuana is considered Schedule 1 at that point. Removing it from Schedule 1 and adding it to Schedule 4, where anyone that has a DA license could prescribe that, negates that purpose of having it as Schedule 1. The other part is with the medical marijuana bill that we passed for medical use. The medication is not prescribed. A person can certify for the patient that needs it that they can have it dispensed. So it is not prescribed. So putting it to Schedule 4 would just open up a lot of people being able to prescribe that medication that don't have to be certified under the current law that we passed before. It would add more confusion taking it out of Schedule 1 and put it in Schedule 4. And for those reasons, I would urge rejection of the amendment.
The lady of the 49th, Delegate Summers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman from the 37th yield?
Gentleman does yield.
Yes.
I just had a couple questions as we discussed it in the Health Committee. I see that you changed the spelling back from the H to the J to the H, and you removed cannabis species. Can you just talk to that on why that was changed back from the amendment made in Health?
The J back to an H was a typo, so I'd ask unanimous consent to reform the amendment to make the H a J. And what was the second question?
We had the discussion in committee about cannabis species being in there, and remember I had the concern about hemp, and were we making it a Schedule 1? So I'm just wondering, that's out of there too? Did you find anything out about that? Or?
Yeah, this would have no effect on hemp.
But if it doesn't have effect, how come you didn't put it in there? I was just wondering. How come this amendment doesn't say what the amendment was in Health about cannabis species?
That was a different amendment in Health, I believe you're referring to.
I don't think so, but that's okay. Thank you.
Gentleman's asked unanimous consent to reform the spelling error in the amendment. Are there objections? Chair hears no objections to the reformation. Gentleman from the 55th, Delegate Spinagle.
Will the sponsor yield? If the practical effect of this is, what's the current penalty right now if you're caught with a controlled substance that's labeled as Schedule 1 possession? It has greater penalties to that, is that correct?
Yes.
Schedule 4 doesn't decriminalize it, but it basically knocks it down to a misdemeanor offense if you have marijuana, is that correct?
Correct. If someone was in possession of it and didn't say they didn't have the card that we're hopefully going to be issuing in July of this year, if they didn't have that card to say that they could legally have it, yeah, it would still be illegal under this, but the penalties would be lessened because it wouldn't be a Schedule 1, it would be a Schedule 4 non-narcotic, which would put it in line with things like benzodiazepine.
And currently it's scheduled in there with heroin, cocaine, other types of controlled substances, but if you knock it down to Schedule 4, it will not be listed as that. It will be a lesser criminal penalty, correct?
That is correct.
All right, thank you.
Are there further members who wish to speak to the adoption of the amendment? If not, the question before the House is the lady from the 51st, Delegate Fleischauer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think it's about time we change this. Marijuana has never killed anybody, and heroin is something that kills people. That's Schedule 1. And I think there are both effects in the judicial system and effects for and how it affects people medically. So I think it's time that we change this and we don't put our citizens into jail for years and years and years for something that has never killed anybody and that has medicinal uses. So I urge adoption of the amendment.
The gentleman from the 14th, Delegate Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't know what the big infatuation is with marijuana and being stoned out of your mind or whatever it is we're trying to accomplish here. And the assertion that marijuana has never killed anyone is just totally false. I know that from personal experience, and I'm not going to get into all that right now. But, ladies and gentlemen, this is not the right way to go for West Virginia. We need more sober-minded people who know what they're doing rather than having people walking around in some state of being in a buzz or something. So for those reasons, I urge that we reject this amendment.
The gentleman of the 58th, Douglas Coles.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I also rise in opposition to the amendment. There are questions about the drafting and just how this is fitting in there. Certainly in committee, I think hemp was a part of it, and now out here, it's not. I'm not sure how that exactly plays into it, but it seems to me that this state, if we adopt the amendment, it will be in conflict with the federal law. This bill is something we deal with every year. We need to adopt in West Virginia the schedule of the federal drug list every year. It's routine. If we adopt this amendment, it will be in conflict with the federal law and cause confusion. Secondly, I think it is in some ways in conflict with the medical marijuana law we just passed. This will allow prescribers, medical doctors, to be able to prescribe Schedule 4. So, I'm not sure how the medical marijuana law that we set up was outside of that system. So, Mr. Speaker, there's a lot of confusion with the amendment as it is now, and I would urge its rejection.
Are there other members who wish to speak to the amendment before the gentleman closes debate? If not, the gentleman 32nd, Douglas Fast.
Would Chairman of Health yield for a question?
Chairman does yield.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What are the effects if something is a Schedule 1 versus a Schedule 4? What differences are there as far as access and, if you know, criminal implications, for instance, like driving under the influence of a Schedule 4 versus a Schedule 1?
Right. Schedule 1 is considered to have no medical purpose, so that's why it's put as Schedule 1. And it is illegal to prescribe that. So we don't have, other than research purposes, and my understanding, you don't have a license for Schedule 1 from the DEA, federal DEA. Schedule 4, you can have Schedules 2, 3, 4, 5. Schedule 4, under this classification, they put it under hallucinogens. So any provider that has that schedule can prescribe it. Nurse practitioners can, physician assistants, medical doctors, any of them can. And if we extend prescriptive authority to other professionals like psychologists in the future, they could prescribe a Schedule 4 too. So that makes it a lot easier access. Under the Medical Cannabis Act, we were avoiding the prescription by saying a person could be certified by a professional, meaning certification, not a prescription, because it would be illegal federally to prescribe marijuana as a medication. So to avoid that conflict, we kept it as Schedule 1, made the certification, and then had a dispensary. So within the state, they could avoid state ramifications for that. They still could fall into federal, though, if the feds are elected to enforce that.
All right,
so
thank
that's
you.
pretty much the difference, if that answers your question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman of the 62nd, Douglas Bibby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman yield to a quick question, just to confirm?
The sponsor or the chairman?
The sponsor, I'm sorry. No, the chairman, I'm sorry.
You're trying to give me my exercise today, huh?
I just want to reiterate, just because when you did say by doing what this amendment proposes to do would put us in conflict with the with U.S. federal law.
Correct.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to speak to the amendment.
Proceed.
I rise in oppose of the amendment. I'd like to remind the delegates here, we all took an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States and also the Constitution of West Virginia. I'd like to quote Article 1 of the West Virginia Constitution. The state of West Virginia is and shall remain one of the United States of America. The Constitution of the United States of America and the laws and treaties made in pursuance thereof shall be the supreme law of the land. That's not my opinion. That's not me speaking. That's the Constitution of West Virginia. So I urge we reject this amendment because it is in conflict with our Constitution. Thank you.
Are there other members who wish to speak to the passage of the amendment? If not, the gentleman from 37th to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just first to address the issue that was brought up by the gentlelady from the 49th, and I believe it was also brought up from the gentleman from the 58th about how this would affect our growing hemp industry in West Virginia. Actually, just to clear a few misconceptions up, hemp is the same plant but it has to have a lower concentration of THC in it. It has under 0.03% THC. The federal government has recently descheduled cannabis with that low level of THC, and I believe it was the Federal Farm Act that was recently signed into law by President Trump. I believe we should update the schedule to reflect that, but under the eyes of the federal government, hemp under that particular level is legal, and this amendment would have absolutely no effect on that. It was also stated that this would put us out of line with federal guidelines. I would like to remind the body there is a rules bundle moving quite quickly through this building right now that would change DEP rules that would put us out of line with EPA rules. It happens all the time in this building that we pass things that are in conflict with federal guidelines such as the EPA and from other agencies. But more important than that, the reason I've offered this amendment is because if you look at Schedule 1 and look at all these substances, many of these are very dangerous designer drugs in there. I believe heroin's in there, cocaine. These are all reserved for substances that have absolutely no medicinal value. Now, through the research that we have done since we have passed the Medical Cannabis Act, it's quite clear there is a medicinal value for cannabis. So this simply puts the substance where it belongs, a Schedule 4 non-narcotic, if it's even scheduled at all. We decided to reschedule it, putting it in a place where it does have some medicinal value, but still could be controlled. But if you look at all these other substances in Schedule 1, the big difference is if you take too many of any of those, you will have a lethal overdose. And there are no known lethal overdoses from cannabis. So it does not belong in Schedule 1. It's more fitting to have it Schedule 4, non-narcotic. So I urge support for the amendment, and I would ask for a roll call.
Roll call has been demanded. Is the demand sustained? Demand is sustained. The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, 42 ayes, 57 nays, one member absent not voting. Less than the majority of those present having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the amendment rejected. Are there further amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced. Are there further bills on second reading? If not, bills on first reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2173, allowing state and federal law enforcement officers to testify as to the contents and evidence of a wiretap or electronic surveillance.
Bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2338, allowing the owner of an antique military vehicle to display alternate registration insignia.
Bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2359, relating to exemptions to the commercial driver's license requirements.
Bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2673, creating the Oil and Gas Abandoned Well Plugging Fund.
Bill will be advanced.
House Bill 2692, relating to primary elections and procedures.
Bill will be advanced.
House Bill 2709, relating to hunting licenses.
Bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2715, relating to Class Q special hunting permit for disabled persons.
Bill will be advanced.
House Bill 2739, relating to contributions on behalf of employees to a retirement plan administered by the Consolidated Public Retirement Board.
Bill will be advanced.
House Bill 2743, eliminating eliminating reference to municipal policemen's pension and relief funds and firemen's pension and relief funds in section restricting investment.
Bill to be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2793, expanding applicability of educational facilities for the West Virginia College Prepaid Tuition and Savings Program.
Bill to be advanced.
House Bill 2819, relating generally to contractors.
Bill to be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2821, updating provisions for command, clerical, and other pay.
Bill to be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2848, relating to West Virginia ABLE Act.
Bill to be advanced.
House Bill 2992, relating to governmental websites.
Bill to be advanced. Are there further bills on first reading? Leaves of absence. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For our colleague, Delegate Kump.
Are there objections? Chair hears no objections. Leave will be granted. Remarks by members of the House. The gentleman of the 3rd, Douglas Fluharty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We just had a little debate on subject matter I'm going to talk about real quick, and that's the issue of a drug-free workforce, which we hear so often that we don't have a drug-free workforce, and because of that, we have to bring in people from out of state to do the jobs and replace those here. I'm wondering if we have a drug-free legislature, and if maybe a few need replaced, because if you think about it, those who build our schools, drug tested. Those who transport our children to those schools, drug tested. Those who receive government benefits, drug tested. Those who pass the laws, not drug tested. Now, I've had many of you come up to me on a bill I've been putting in the hopper every year about drug testing ourselves, the legislators. And I have some good news for those of you who have been inquiring about it. Tomorrow, in an effort to have transparency and accountability in this body, the West Virginia State Building and Construction Trades will be sponsoring a free drug testing of legislators event in the Lower Rotunda, February 13th from 10 to 2. So I hope that you join me in getting drug tested. All right, we'll see you tomorrow, Lower Rotunda, 10 to 2. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Are there further remarks by members of the House? The gentleman of the 50th, Douglas Caputo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Unanimous consent that the remarks regarding the amendment on 2878 by the gentleman from the 37th and the gentlelady from the 51st be printed in the appendix of the journal, and also the remarks just made by the gentleman from the 3rd, Delegate Fluharty.
Are there objections? Chair hears no objections. Introduction to guests. Gentleman of the 7th, Douglas Harshbarger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have today joined me a newly elected county commissioner up in the North Gallery, Randall Riggs. If he could please rise and the House make him welcome. Thank you.
Lady from the 38th, Douglas Graves.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague speaks really fast, and so earlier when we were introducing guests, I don't think everyone understood that my distinguished colleague's wife is up in the gallery, and I'd really like it if we would stand and welcome her properly.
Gentleman of the 9th, Douglas Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our doctor of the day comes to us from Charleston, West Virginia. Please welcome Dr. Andy Tanner.
Are there further introductions? If not, miscellaneous business. Chair sees none. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, subject to announcements, the House adjourn until 11 a.m. Wednesday, February 13th.
Lady from the 49th moves that, subject to announcements, the House stand adjourned until 11 a.m. on tomorrow, Wednesday, February 13th. Are there announcements? The gentleman from the 35th, Doug Capito.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tomorrow at 9 a.m. in the Committee on the Judiciary Committee Room, the Committee on the Judiciary will meet, and the agenda will be posted. Thank you.
Gentleman from the 21st, Doug Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Education will meet tomorrow at 2 p.m. in the Education Committee Room. The agenda will be posted.
Lady from the 38th, Doug Graves.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Pensions and Retirement will meet today in House Finance Room at 4 p.m. The agenda has been posted.
Gentleman from the 28th, Doug Pack.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Government Organization will meet tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. in the House Government Organization Committee Room. The agenda is posted. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, Republican members of this House will caucus here in the chamber immediately upon adjournment.
The lady from the 3rd, Dr. Storch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Political Subdivisions will meet at 1 o'clock today in the House Education Room. The agenda is posted.
Gentleman from the 41st, Doggett Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Health and Human Resources will meet today at 2 p.m. in room 215E. The agenda is posted. Republican members will caucus in the chairman's office at 1:30.
Gentleman from the 10th, Doggett Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Energy will meet today in the Judiciary Conference Room at 2 p.m. Republican members will meet in the chairman's office at 1:30.
Gentleman from the 25th, Doggett Painter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Veterans Affairs and Homeland Security will meet tomorrow at 1 o'clock in House Ed. An agenda will be posted.
Gentleman from the 66th, Doggett Espinoza.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a reminder, we'll be honoring our speaker tonight at our annual speakers dinner. Festivities get underway at 6 o'clock here in the Upper House Rotunda. Appreciate all those of you that have RSVP'd. Our committee has put together a nice program and a delicious dinner, so look forward to the fellowship this evening.
Gentleman from the 17th, Doggett Lovejoy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The House Hunger Caucus will meet tomorrow. That's Wednesday, the 13th at 4 p.m. in 252. Thank you.
The lady from the 32nd, Doggett Staggers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Democrat members of Health and Human Resources will meet at 1:30 in room 230 East. Thanks.
Gentleman from the 43rd, Doggett Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I realize that we are past this, but I request that we also recognize some guests. We missed one of our pages.
We missed a page. We don't have that. Gentleman may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today with us also we have Reagan Cart from North School, joined by Father John Cart. Thank you.
Gentleman from the 50th, Doggett Caputo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Democratic members of the House will caucus immediately upon the floor session in the House Health Committee Room, 215E. We'll caucus immediately in the House Health Committee Room, 215E. That's a handful, or a mouthful.
Are there further announcements?
Mr. Speaker.
Lady from the 49th.
Your Rules Committee will meet tomorrow morning at 10:45 behind the chamber.
Are there further announcements? If not, question before the House is a motion by the lady from the 49th that the House stand adjourned until 11 a.m. on tomorrow, Wednesday, February 13th. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. Ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. The House is adjourned until 11 a.m. tomorrow.